Thank you for joining us today. My name is Paul Schifrin. I am a director in the audit department here, and I am joined by Anthony DeJulian, a principal in the risk management department. And we're going to be talking about SOC services today. And why don't we just jump right into the learning objectives. So we're going to talk a little bit about history, the evolution of SOC reporting. Then we are going to talk about SOC 1 reports, which are focusing on financial reporting. Then SOC 2 reports, which are meeting the needs of broader user range of service providers. And then a specialty SOC 3 reports, go through a kind of a comparison between all three of them and show the differences and similarities, and then we'll conclude. So just want to start with kind of like the evolution of SOC reporting, kind of where we started from and to get to where we are right now. So the original reporting on internal control really dates back to October 1958, as you can see on the slide, but want to kind of really start with April 1992, which is SAS 70. That kind of, for the first time, codified a service organization's ability to get a third party to go in and perform an engagement on their controls and issue a report, which they could then issue to their clients and prospects. SAS 70 was supposed to be for service organizations whose services rolled up into the financial statements of their clients. And so therefore it really focused on those controls and those services, those control areas that would be important to their clients' internal control structure around their financial statements. In the 1990s and the 2000s, we saw really the growth of software as a service, and then finally we saw the advent and explosion of the cloud. And what that led to was really the misuse of SAS 70. A lot of companies started to try to expand the scope on their own of SAS 70 to relate to controls that no longer really were rolling up into the financial statements of their clients, but rather were just surrounding the data that these companies now had some sort of control over and were applying it to theirs. So the AICPA kind of saw what was happening, and in April of 2010 introduced SSAE number 16. And what they really did at this point was split SAS 70 from and rename it as SSAE 16, and then also come up with the SOC 1 and the SOC 2 world. SOC 1, which is synonymous with SSAE 16, and then as you can see, was then updated and upgraded in April of 2016 to SSAE 18. That still is for service companies whose product rolls up into their customers' financial statements. The SOC 2 engagement became the new engagement to address this phenomenon of cloud computing, and that is what is then used for service organizations who just want a report on their services that they're providing to their clients, that where they're housing data, where they say they've got, and they need to show that they have the proper security or availability in some other areas of interest over that data. So really, in April of 2010, there became that split. And so now kind of what we will hopefully accomplish in this webinar is to give the explanation of what is a SOC 1, what is a SOC 2, what's the difference, so that you can make the educated decision over which report is right for your service area. So, SOC 1 reports. As we said, focusing on controls related to financial reporting. The most important thing that you can remember about a SOC 1 is that you, as the service provider, are letting us as the service auditor know what is in scope and out of scope. So you are defining the walls, the barriers of the system that's in scope. That, as you'll see later on, is in direct contrast to how a SOC 2 works. But as a service auditor, all we have to do, our mandate is just to say whether or not everything that is key controls are included in the report. But you're allowed to really kind of sculpt and craft what goes into that report, which parts of your service offering go into that report, which is really a great advantage to you because it really lets you control the scope and present to your clients and your prospects the picture that you want to present to them. A couple of examples of service organizations where this would be very applicable to are data service centers, because there, even though that might not directly roll up into financial statements, it could be where your customers are housing all of their financial data, and therefore the controls over those service centers are very important. Cloud computing and network monitoring services for the same reason. It's just if the data that you're monitoring is rolling up into financial statements, then it could be very important there. Payroll and medical claim processing, as well as other third-party administrators, a lot of that rolls directly into financial statements, and then lending services, as well as other financial institutions. And one of the large, impetus for needing a SOC 1 report is if you are a public entity and you are dealing with SOX with an X 404, and any of your services are being outsourced to a third party, that third party, then you as the service provider probably need to do that, because eventually somewhere down the line an auditor is going to be opining on those internal controls over financial services. So that is really the most important thing that I can have everybody know from this, is that SOC 1 reports is for controls relating to financial reporting, and if you as a service organization believe that in any way the services that you are providing, will be rolling up in that fashion, then the SOC 1 report could be right for you. And then, of course, the next important thing is to remember that you have to get together with your auditor and really develop the scope of that report. Within SOC 1, you then have two types of reports, a type 1 report and a type 2 report. Eventually, pretty much all of your customers and prospects will probably want you to get a type 2 report. The reason being that it gives more assurance to those customers, because a type 2 report audits your controls over a period of time. A type 1 report a lot of time is the starting place. A type 1, the auditor will come in and we will look at your system and we will opine on whether your controls are in place and designed effectively at a point in time. Then the type 2 report takes it to the next step. We will take a look at your control environment and we will audit it over a period of time, typically between 6 months and 1 year, and we will not only opine on whether the controls are designed and implemented effectively, but also whether they are operating effectively over that period of time. So it is a lot more invasive and comprehensive, probably a better word, and therefore it gives a lot more comfort to your clients, and that's the report that 99% of clients and prospects are looking to get. A SOC 2 report, as we'll learn, also has a type 1 and a type 2, but those are the important designations between the two. And from there, you can make the decision on what's more important to you and what will help you and your firm and your customers in meeting their needs. And then now we'll talk about SOC 2 reports, and for that I will turn it over to Anthony.
Thanks, Paul. As Paul mentioned earlier, one of the most important designations when talking about the difference between a SOC 1 and a SOC 2 is that specificity to customer data, and really focusing, SOC 2 focuses on third-party vendors who either store or process customer data. So going much further and beyond the scope of financial reporting and focusing on what the AICPA has defined as 5 trust service criteria. We look at it as like a hub and spoke model, where you've got the common criteria, otherwise known as the security, as the hub, kind of the wheel, and the additional availability, processing, integrity, confidentiality, and privacy criteria as your spokes. Because at a minimum, any organization going through a SOC 2 will start with the common criteria or the security criteria, and that is focused really on protection of data. So the areas of focus include access management, change management, network security, as well as disclosure requirements or communication with your customers based on any incidents that may occur within your system during the period and scope. There's also a set of organizational controls focused on how you as an organization manage your team and your organization over that owns and manages and processes the security functions. The availability criteria is really focused on accessibility of the system. So you're really looking more at performance monitoring, ensuring that there are sufficient backup controls in place over data and disaster recovery. Processing integrity is really focused on data delivery, so ensuring that data that you as an organization are processing is complete and accurate for your clients. Think of it as like quality assurance measures. Confidentiality, which is the 4th criteria, is really focused on how you as an organization restrict data to a specific persons, or organizationally, and focuses on more specific access controls, firewall configurations, and encryption standards, as well as policies and procedures requirements around confidentiality. The last is privacy. Privacy, as you might expect, is really focused on how as an organization you collect, use, distribute, disclose, and then in theory, retention parameters around personal information. And it's in conformity with the AICPA's generally accepted privacy principle. So it's a very specific set of criteria defined by the AICPA around privacy and controls therein. As Paul mentioned, one of the keys when thinking about SOC 2 is that the AICPA, within each of these criteria, has defined the requirements that you as an organization must follow. You may not, every criteria or every control area might not be applicable to your organization, but all areas must be addressed. Whereas within the SOC 1, you're defining the scope and the objectives based on the services that you provide. A SOC 3 report is very similar in scope to a SOC 2 report, whereas the biggest differentiator is really the end product that you're receiving. So a SOC 2 report, similar to a SOC 1, has specific restricted use applied to it. A SOC 3 is a public report. You can put it on your website. You can distribute it freely. There are no restrictions as defined by the AICPA. The report itself is condensed because of that. So you don't have a lot of the details around your control environment and the results of testing for each specific requirement as you do within the SOC 2 report. It's basically an opinion, an assertion, and a very high-level description of services. But the scope is similar in terms of the criteria that would be audited against would be similar to that of a SOC 2, type 2 engagement. So you're looking at operating effectiveness over a period of time for either a security or additional criteria within the SOC 2 parameters. But the report that you then issue is an actual certification, which differentiates from SOC 1 and SOC 2, which are audit reports. The SOC 3 is a formal certification that you can publish on your website. So looking back and comparing the SOC 1, SOC 2, and SOC 3 reports, again, the most important factor when determining which report is right is looking back to what you as an organization perform as services to your clients and what the needs are for those clients. So if you are performing controls that can impact your customer's financial reporting, then you're going to want to look to a SOC 1 report. If you have access to or store or process customer data, then you're going to look to a SOC 2 report to provide comfort to your client or customer over the security of that data. It may be in some cases where a SOC 1 and a SOC 2 report are applicable to an organization because of that. Paul mentioned data centers earlier. It's a great candidate for applicability of both a SOC 1 and SOC 2 report because, yes, you could impact your customer's financial reporting if they're housing their financial system within your data center. But more importantly, you probably do want to look at the security and availability of your services as it relates to hosting and managing that data. We also talk about what, in terms of the good fit for your organization, some of the things that your clients will be looking for. A lot of the time, these reports are driven by customer needs or prospects' needs. So ensuring that you have a clear understanding as to what their requirements and needs are, and then fitting your report structure based on those needs. Paul mentioned SSA 18 stemming from SAS 70. That's the applicable standard for SOC 1 reports. SOC 2 reports, the standard itself is ATC 205 within the AICPA guidance, and SOC 3 follows the same applicable professional standard as SOC 2. As I mentioned with SOC 3, the only actual certification across these three report options is the SOC 3 report, and that is primarily due to the nature and details included within the report. So a SOC 1 and SOC 2 report, while they aren't certifications, they are reports that show that you meet a certain level of requirements within your organization, whether it's type 1, it's a point in time, and then type 2, that you have those controls in place over a period of time. The SOC 1 and SOC 2 reports have that option of being either type 1 or type 2, whereas the SOC 3 report, because it is general use, and there is only the applicability of a type 2 report over a period of time. I think we've touched on the restricted audience a few times, but again, the overall audience does differ significantly as well across the reports. Within a SOC 1 report, your audience is specific to your management team as well as the end user entity's financial statement auditors, so your customers' auditors, and that's it. That's really the restricted use that is defined by the AICPA for SOC 1. SOC 2 has slightly more general use. You've got the same parameters around your management team, your customers, and their auditors, but it also does expand to prospective users or business partners, so potential clients or customers as well. And then the SOC 3 being a general use and a public report has no parameter around the audience. Great, and then I'm going to turn it back to Paul to go through a few other additional things to consider.
Great, thanks, Anthony. So, hopefully you've learned the differences between a SOC 1 and a SOC 2 now, and then that SOC 3 certification, which is fantastic because you can put that on your website and have that seal there for people to see. But, so a lot of people, when they're first looking to get in this type of report for their organization, there's a lot of information out there, and it can be confusing. So hopefully we've helped you out there. The benefits, though, of a SOC are really large because this allows you to present a report to a prospect or to a client without them having to come and maybe do audit procedures, each and every one of them at your place of business. And this just one report done each year that you can give to them, to a myriad of your prospects and your customers, and take care of it right there. Hopefully it can also be value added to you if you choose the right partner, because you're going to, the service auditor should be going in, taking a look at your environment, making sure that you have the best practices for your internal controls in place. And if you do choose the right service provider, they'll work with you, especially if you have a SOC 1 report, to hone the objectives that are going to be going into that report, taking a look at your controls mapping those controls, whether it be a SOC 1 or a SOC 2, letting you know what best practices are in the industry, and really helping to align your report with your organizational goals, with industry regulations, and with the internal control environments that are best for your practice and your organization. So it's really important that you get all the education that you need going in to the SOC environment, and really important that you choose a partner that you feel comfortable with and that can walk you through the process and get you to the point that you've delivered a report which puts the best face forward for your organization to your clients and your prospects. Because at the end of the day, that's what they're going to be looking at. That's what they're going to be judging. Or one of the ways that they're going to be judging your organization. So go out and make sure that you do your homework, do your research, and choose a provider that really is best for you, and the report that is the correct one for your organization.
Yeah, and I would just add, as Paul mentioned before, even specific to a SOC 2, even though the AICPA defines the criteria, it really shouldn't be a check-the-box exercise. Because the way that the criteria are defined, they're based to meet a wide range of audience. So you've got all different industries, organizations of different size. So there is flexibility to how you design your control environment to meet those criteria. And that's part of what Paul mentioned about working with an organization that focuses on making sure that the controls you design fit your resources and your organization size as well. And to ensure that the controls that you put in place and test will bring value to your organization beyond just a check-the-box report that you can just hand over to your customer base.
So hopefully we've given you the beginning of your education on SOC, and we thank you very much for joining us.